The massive alien ship appeared without warning above Luna Base, casting a shadow that stretched for miles across the gray lunar surface. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the main command center, watching the vessel with growing unease. The ship was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly metal that seemed to shift colors in the pale light of distant Earth. Director Lisa Hayes joined him at the window, her breath forming small clouds in the cool air of the pressurized dome. She had been in charge of the human colonial government for 3 years now, ever since humanity had finally achieved faster-than-light travel and established their first permanent off-world settlement. The achievement had filled everyone with hope and excitement about exploring the galaxy. But now something told her that their isolation was about to end in ways they had never imagined. The alien ship remained motionless for several hours, neither responding to radio communications nor showing any signs of hostile intent. Jake had scrambled the defense fleet, but their 12 patrol ships looked like toys compared to the enormous vessel hanging in space above them. The ship had to be at least 5 miles long, with strange crystalline structures jutting from its hull and what appeared to be weapon ports that could easily destroy Luna Base with a single shot. Finally, as the Earth began to rise over the lunar horizon, the alien ship transmitted a message on all frequencies. The voice that came through the speakers was deep and resonant, speaking perfect English with an accent that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet. I am Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. We have monitored your recent achievement of faster-than-light travel and your establishment of this lunar settlement. According to the ancient laws that govern all civilized space, your species must now be formally inducted into the galactic community under the protection and guidance of the Council." Lisa and Jake exchanged worried glances. The word protection sounded ominous when spoken by a being whose ship could obliterate their entire base without effort. Lisa activated the communication console and responded carefully. "Ambassador Zethkar, this is Director Lisa Hayes of the Human Colonial Government. We welcome contact with your people and the Galactic Council. We are honored by your visit and eager to learn about the galactic community you represent. How may we assist you?" There was a long pause before the ambassador replied, and when he did, his tone had shifted to something more formal and businesslike. "Director Hayes, I will be direct with you as befits your species' apparent preference for simple communication. The Galactic Council consists of 12 ancient civilizations that have maintained peace and order in this galaxy for over 50,000 of your years. All species that achieve interstellar capability must pay tribute to maintain this peace and to receive the Council's protection from the various dangers that exist in deep space." Jake felt his stomach drop. The word tribute carried implications that he did not like at all. Lisa maintained her diplomatic composure, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "What kind of tribute are you referring to, Ambassador? The standard tribute for a newly inducted species such as yours is quite reasonable. You will provide 50% of all mineral resources extracted from your worlds, 30% of your food production, and 100,000 of your people annually to serve as laborers in Council territories. This arrangement has worked successfully with over 300 species throughout the galaxy." The communication channel fell silent as Lisa and Jake processed what they had just heard. Jake began calculating numbers in his head and realized that the demanded tribute would cripple humanity's expansion efforts and condemn thousands of people to slavery every year. The casual way the ambassador had delivered these terms made it clear that he expected immediate compliance. Lisa took a deep breath and chose her words very carefully. "Ambassador, these terms would place a significant burden on our species. Our total population is only about 12 billion people, and we are still recovering from the resources we spent developing faster-than-light travel. Could you explain what protection the Council offers in return for this tribute?" "The Council maintains a combined fleet of over 100,000 warships, Director Hayes. We protect member species from pirates, hostile alien races, and various cosmic phenomena that could threaten developing civilizations. We also provide access to established trade routes and advanced technologies that your species would take centuries to develop independently. The tribute system ensures that all species contribute fairly to maintaining this protection. Jake stepped forward and activated his microphone. Ambassador, I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. With respect, your protection system sounds very similar to what we humans call extortion. You are demanding that we give you resources and people in exchange for not attacking us with your superior military force. The ambassador's response came with a tone of cold amusement. Captain Morrison, I understand that primitive species often have difficulty grasping the complexities of galactic politics. Let me be perfectly clear. The Council's tribute system is not negotiable. Every species that has achieved faster-than-light travel has eventually joined our system. Those who have attempted to resist have learned that such resistance is both futile and costly. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest, but forced herself to remain diplomatic. Ambassador Zethkar, we appreciate your explanation of the Council's system. However, humanity values its independence and sovereignty. We would prefer to discuss alternative arrangements that might be mutually beneficial without requiring such extensive tribute payments. Director Hayes, there are no alternative arrangements. The tribute system has maintained galactic peace for millennia because it is uniformly applied to all species. To make exceptions would invite chaos and rebellion throughout Council space. I am not here to negotiate the terms of your membership, but simply to inform you of your obligations as a newly inducted species. The ambassador paused, and when he continued, his voice carried an unmistakable threat. You have 30 standard galactic days to begin compliance with tribute requirements. Failure to comply will result in corrective measures being taken against your species. I strongly advise against testing the Council's resolve in this matter. No species has ever successfully resisted our authority, and I would hate to see humanity become an example for others. Jake and Lisa looked at each other, both understanding that their species had just been presented with an ultimatum that would fundamentally change humanity's future. The choice was simple: submit to alien rule or face destruction by forces beyond their ability to resist. We understand your position, Ambassador, Lisa finally replied. We request permission to consult with our governments on Earth before providing our response. Permission granted. You have 30 days, Director Hayes. I will remain in this system to receive your species' acceptance of Council authority. Do not mistake this delay for weakness or indecision on our part. The tribute system is not optional. The communication channel closed, leaving Jake and Lisa alone with the weight of humanity's first contact with an alien civilization that viewed them as nothing more than another species to be subjugated and exploited. President John Carter stared at the holographic display showing the alien ship hovering above Luna Base, his fingers drumming against the polished surface of the Situation Room table. Around him sat the most powerful leaders on Earth, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and anger that had been building for the past week since Director Hayes had transmitted the Council's demands. The emergency session of the United Earth Assembly had been called within hours of receiving the tribute ultimatum, and representatives from every nation had gathered both physically and virtually to discuss humanity's response. The mood in the room was tense, with some delegates arguing for immediate compliance, while others demanded resistance regardless of the consequences. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood at the front of the room, her weathered face grim as she presented. The military assessment that everyone already knew would be devastating. She had spent her entire career building Earth's defense forces, but nothing had prepared her for facing an enemy with such overwhelming technological superiority. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not sugarcoat our situation, Admiral Sullivan began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen combat in the resource wars that had nearly destroyed Earth 20 years earlier. Our entire fleet consists of 200 ships, most of which are converted cargo vessels with basic defensive weapons. According to Ambassador Zeth Carr, the Galactic Council commands over 100,000 warships. Even if our technology were equal to theirs, which it clearly is not, we would be outnumbered 500 to 1. Representative Pierre Dubois from the European Federation raised his hand. Admiral, what are our chances of survival if we refuse their demands? Honestly, Representative Dubois, if they decide to destroy us, we cannot stop them. Their single ship above Luna Base appears to have enough firepower to level our major cities. A full fleet assault would end human civilization within days. The room fell silent as the brutal reality sank in. President Carter rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of 6 billion lives resting on the decisions made in this room. The tribute demands would essentially make humanity slaves to an alien empire, but resistance seemed to guarantee extinction. Dr. Alex Rivera, head of the Global Science Division, cleared his throat and stood up slowly. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke at political gatherings, but his recent discoveries had given him information that might change everything. Mr. President, if I may, there are some factors that the Galactic Council may not be aware of regarding our technological capabilities. President Carter gestured for him to continue. Please, Dr. Rivera. Any information that might help us understand our options would be valuable. Dr. Rivera activated his tablet and projected technical schematics onto the main display. Over the past 5 years, our research teams have made breakthrough discoveries in quantum engineering and artificial intelligence integration. While the Council clearly has superior numbers and conventional weapons, our approach to technology development appears to be fundamentally different from theirs. Admiral Sullivan leaned forward with interest. Different how, Doctor? From what? We observed of the ambassador's ship. Their technology follows predictable patterns that suggest they rely on established designs that have not changed significantly over time. Human technology, on the other hand, has advanced exponentially in just the past decade. Our quantum weapons can phase through conventional energy shields, and our AI systems can adapt and learn during combat in ways that fixed programming cannot match. Senator Maria Santos from the American Federation stood up, her voice carrying a mixture of hope and skepticism. Dr. Rivera, are you suggesting that we might actually have a chance against them? I am suggesting that they may have made assumptions about our capabilities based on their experience with other species who developed along more conventional technological paths. Humanity's unique approach to innovation might provide advantages that they have not encountered before. The room buzzed with whispered conversations as delegates tried to process this unexpected development. President Carter called for order and addressed Dr. Rivera directly. Doctor, what kind of advantages are we talking about specifically? Our experimental plasma cannons can penetrate energy barriers that would stop conventional weapons. Our self-replicating defense drones can overwhelm enemy targeting systems through sheer numbers and adaptive behavior. Most importantly, our quantum jump drives allow our ships to teleport short distances, which could bypass their defensive formations entirely. Admiral Sullivan looked skeptical but intrigued. Dr. Rivera, these technologies are still largely experimental. We have never tested them against alien defenses. That is true, Admiral, but the same can be said for their weapons against our defenses. The Council appears to have grown complacent after millennia of facing the same types of resistance. They may not be prepared for tactics and technologies they have never encountered. President Carter stood up and walked to the large window overlooking the sprawling city below. Millions of people went about their daily lives, unaware that their entire future hung in the balance of decisions being made in this room. The thought of condemning them all to slavery was unbearable, but the thought of getting them all killed through futile resistance was equally horrifying. Ladies and gentlemen, President Carter said, turning back to face the assembly, we have 23 days remaining to provide our response to the Galactic Council. I want detailed reports on our defensive capabilities, population evacuation, procedures, and diplomatic alternatives. We will explore every possible option before making our final decision. Over the following days, military planners worked around the clock to assess humanity's chances in a direct confrontation. Dr. Rivera's teams ran countless simulations, testing their experimental weapons against theoretical alien defenses. Diplomatic experts searched for historical precedents and possible negotiation strategies. The debates continued for 2 weeks, with passionate arguments on all sides. Some delegates insisted that slavery was preferable to extinction, while others argued that freedom was worth any price. The discussions grew heated as the deadline approached, with several representatives threatening to withdraw their nations from the United Earth Assembly if the wrong decision was made. Finally, on the 28th day, President Carter called for a final vote. The chamber fell silent as he read the resolution that would determine humanity's fate. The question before us is simple. Do we submit to the Galactic Council's tribute demands and accept permanent subjugation for our species? Or do we reject their ultimatum and face the consequences of our defiance? The vote was surprisingly unanimous. Every single representative, despite weeks of heated debate, chose the same option. Secretary of State Maria Santos was tasked with drafting the official response, and she worked through the night to find words that would properly convey humanity's decision. When morning came, she presented a simple document to President Carter. The response was shorter than anyone had expected, containing only a single word that would echo through the galaxy and change the course of history. Captain Morrison received the sealed message and prepared to deliver humanity's answer to Ambassador Zethkar, knowing that this moment would either mark the beginning of humanity's freedom or the end of human civilization. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the sterile corridors of Luna Base toward the docking bay, where a small shuttle waited to transport him to the alien vessel. The sealed data pad in his hand felt heavier than it should, containing humanity's response to the Council's tribute demand. He had read the message before sealing it, and the simplicity of their answer still amazed him. The shuttle ride to the alien ship took only 20 minutes, but it felt like hours as Jake watched the massive vessel grow larger through the viewport. The ship's hull was covered in strange markings that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them, and massive weapon turrets tracked his small craft as it approached the designated docking port. Ambassador Zethkar waited for him in what appeared to be a reception chamber, though the alien architecture made everything feel wrong and uncomfortable. The ambassador himself was even more imposing in person than his voice had suggested, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. His 4 eyes fixed on Jake with an expression that might have been amusement. "Captain Morrison, I trust you bring your species' acceptance of council authority," the ambassador said, extending one of his 4 hands to receive the data pad. Jake handed over the device without comment, watching as the alien's eyes began to glow with a faint blue light as he accessed the message. The chamber fell silent except for the low humming of the ship's systems, and Jake found himself holding his breath as he waited for the ambassador's reaction. When Zethkar read the response aloud, his voice carried a tone of complete disbelief. "No." The single word seemed to echo through the chamber, and Jake could see other alien crew members turning to stare at their ambassador in shock. Several of them began speaking rapidly in their own language, their voices rising in what sounded like urgent discussion. Zethkar looked at the data pad again, as if expecting the message to have changed, then fixed all 4 of his eyes on Jake, with an expression of cold fury. "Captain Morrison, surely this is some form of communication error. No species simply refuses council authority with a single word." Jake straightened his shoulders and met the alien's gaze directly. "Ambassador, there is no error. That is humanity's official response to your tribute demands." The ambassador's skin color shifted to a darker shade, and Jake could sense dangerous anger building in the alien's demeanor. Several crew members had moved closer, and Jake realized that his diplomatic immunity might not protect him if the situation deteriorated further. "Captain, perhaps your leaders do not fully understand the consequences of defying the council," Allow me to clarify the situation for you. Zethkar activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber, showing star charts with thousands of marked systems throughout the galaxy. Red indicators showed the locations of Council fleets, and Jake could see that they vastly outnumbered the few green dots that seemed to represent independent or neutral territories. The Galactic Council has maintained order in this galaxy for over 50,000 years, Captain Morrison. We have inducted over 300 species into our protection system, and not one has ever successfully resisted our authority. Those who have attempted defiance have been crushed so thoroughly that their worlds are now uninhabited monuments to the futility of challenging council power. The holographic display zoomed in on several systems that showed barren planets with clear signs of massive destruction, cities reduced to glass craters, continents scarred by orbital bombardment, and dead worlds that had once supported billions of lives. The Krextal Federation had over 2 billion inhabitants when they refused tribute. The Morvac Empire commanded a fleet of nearly 10,000 ships. The Zenith Collective had technologies that impressed even our oldest member species. All of them chose defiance, Captain Morrison, and all of them are now extinct. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the devastated worlds, but he forced himself to remain calm and focused on his mission. Ambassador, humanity appreciates your explanation of Council history, but our answer remains unchanged. Zethkar's 4 eyes widened in what Jake could only interpret as genuine shock. The alien ambassador began pacing around the chamber, his movements becoming more agitated with each step. Captain, I must contact the Council immediately to report this unprecedented response. In 50 millennia of galactic history, no species has ever simply refused tribute without attempting negotiation, without offering alternatives, without even asking for additional time to consider. Jake watched as the ambassador activated a communication console and began speaking rapidly in the alien language. Even without understanding the words, Jake could tell that the conversation was becoming increasingly heated. Other council members appeared on the holographic display, their various alien forms showing clear signs of agitation and anger. After nearly an hour of intense discussion, Zethkar turned back to Jake with an expression of cold determination. Captain Morrison, the Council has decided that an example must be made. Supreme Chancellor Krexthul of the Hegemony has authorized the deployment of the first assault fleet to your system. Admiral War Prime Kethmore will arrive within 7 standard days with 5,000 warships to demonstrate the consequences of defying Council authority. Jake felt his stomach drop at the mention of 5,000 ships, but he maintained his composure and delivered the final part of his instructions. Ambassador, I am authorized to inform you that humanity will defend itself against any aggressive action taken by Council forces. We do not seek conflict, but we will not submit to subjugation. The Didio ambassador's laugh was a harsh sound that made Jake's skin crawl. Captain Morrison, your entire species has 200 primitive vessels. War Prime Kethmore commands 5,000 of the most advanced warships in galactic history. Your defense fleet will be obliterated before they can even target our ships effectively. Jake turned to leave, but paused at the chamber entrance to deliver one final message. Ambassador, you may have superior numbers and advanced technology, but you have never faced humanity before. We are a species that has survived ice ages, global wars, and planetary disasters through determination and innovation. We do not surrender easily. As Jake's shuttle returned to Luna Base, he could see frantic activity throughout the lunar facility as word of the Council's response spread. Military commanders were already implementing emergency protocols, and he could see the first human ships beginning to disperse throughout the solar system in preparation for the coming battle. Meanwhile, aboard the Council vessel, Ambassador Zethkar transmitted humanity's defiance to every member species in the galaxy, confident that the swift destruction of Earth would serve as a powerful reminder of Council authority. neither he nor the other. Council leaders realized that this moment would mark the beginning of the end for their ancient empire. Colonel Sam Turner stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the tactical display as 5,000 alien ships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. The Council fleet stretched across space like a deadly constellation, each ship larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had ever built. War Prime Kethmore had arrived exactly when promised, bringing enough firepower to reduce Earth to molten rock within hours. The human defense fleet looked pathetic in comparison, scattered throughout the solar system in small groups that seemed impossibly outnumbered. Admiral Kate Sullivan had deployed their ships according to Dr. Rivera's strategic recommendations, but seeing the enemy force made even the most optimistic military planners question whether their experimental technologies could possibly make up for such overwhelming odds. Engineer Rachel Gold worked frantically at her control station, making final adjustments to the orbital defense platforms that had been hidden throughout the asteroid belt. Her self-replicating drone swarms were still powering up, their fusion cores reaching optimal energy levels just as the Council fleet began its approach toward Earth. She had spent 3 sleepless days preparing for this moment, knowing that her creations would either save humanity or fail spectacularly on the largest possible stage. War Prime Kethmore broadcast his intentions on all frequencies as his massive flagship led the assault formation toward the inner solar system. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had crushed dozens of rebellious species and never faced serious resistance. Primitive humans, I am War Prime Kethmore of the 1st Assault Fleet. Your defiance of Council authority ends today. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Continue your resistance, and we will make your species' destruction a slow example for the galaxy. President Carter responded from the emergency command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, his voice steady despite the impossible odds they faced. War Prime Kethmore, this is President John Carter of the United Earth Government. We reject your ultimatum and will defend our world and our freedom with everything we have. Humanity does not surrender. The War Prime's laughter echoed across space as his fleet accelerated toward Earth, confident that the small human ships posed no real threat to his overwhelming force. The first phase of the battle began when the Council fleet reached the orbit of Mars. War Prime Kethmore ordered a traditional opening bombardment, expecting to destroy the scattered human ships with a single coordinated strike. Thousands of energy beams lanced through space toward their targets, but something unexpected happened when they reached the human vessels. Commander Nick Barnes led the first wave of human fighters in a desperate charge against the alien formation, his squadron using flight patterns that seemed random and chaotic to the Council targeting computers. The alien ships had been designed to fight conventional battles against opponents who followed established tactical doctrines, but human pilots flew with an unpredictability that confused their automated defense systems. More importantly, the human ships began vanishing and reappearing in different locations as their experimental quantum jump drives activated. Council weapons that had been aimed at specific targets found empty space as human vessels teleported behind enemy formations and struck at undefended sections of their hulls. War Prime Kethmore watched his tactical display with growing confusion, as his fleet's opening barrage failed to eliminate even a single human ship. The primitive vessels were using some form of short-range teleportation technology that his sensors could barely track, making accurate targeting nearly impossible. Takaporos. Situation became much worse when Rachel Gold's hidden orbital platforms revealed themselves throughout the asteroid belt. Hundreds of concealed weapons emplacements opened fire simultaneously, creating a crossfire that caught the Council fleet completely off guard. The platforms used Dr. Rivera's quantum plasma cannons, weapons that phased through the aliens, energy shields as if they did not exist. Explosions began blooming throughout the Council formation as human weapons found their marks. The alien shields that had protected their ships for thousands of years proved useless against humanity's revolutionary technology, and massive warships that had never been damaged in battle started taking critical hits from opponents they had, dismissed as primitives. War Prime Kethmore ordered his fleet to focus fire on the orbital platforms, but before his weapons could target them effectively, Rachel Gold activated her ultimate creation. Millions of small defense drones launched from hidden facilities throughout the solar system, their numbers so vast that they appeared like metallic clouds against the darkness of space. The drone swarms moved with frightening intelligence, each unit sharing combat data with every other unit in real time. When Council Point defense systems destroyed dozens of drones, the survivors instantly adapted their approach patterns to avoid the same fate. The swarms began swarming individual Council ships, overwhelming their defenses through sheer numbers and coordinated attacks. Captain Linda Foster commanded the Earth ship Valiant in a direct assault on War Prime Kethmore's flagship, using her quantum jump drive to teleport her vessel directly inside the Council formation. Human ships began appearing throughout the alien fleet, bypassing their defensive screens entirely and striking at critical systems from point-blank range. The War Prime watched in horror as his mighty fleet began disintegrating around him. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being torn apart by tiny human drones, while others fell victim to weapons that ignored every defensive technology the Council had developed over millennia. His tactical computers could not process what was happening because nothing in their databases had prepared them for this type of warfare. Commander Barnes led his squadron in a kamikaze attack against a Council battleship, his fighters using their jump drives to teleport directly into the alien vessel's hangar bay. The internal explosions crippled the massive ship, and other human pilots began copying the tactic against targets throughout the enemy formation. Within 6 hours of the battle's beginning, the Council's overwhelming numerical advantage had become meaningless. Human technology and tactics had turned the engagement into a massacre, with alien ships falling by the hundreds while the human fleet remained largely intact. War Prime. Kethmore's flagship took critical damage when Rachel Gold's drones penetrated its shields and began systematically destroying its weapons systems. As the second day of fighting dawned, the once mighty First Assault Fleet was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing desperately toward the edge of the solar system. War Prime Kethmore's communications to the Council became increasingly frantic as he reported the impossible defeat of his forces by a species that should have been easily crushed. The Battle of Sol ended with humanity's complete victory and the capture of dozens of Council ships, including War Prime Kethmore's own flagship. The galaxy would never be the same. The news of humanity's victory at the Battle of Sol spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by the few Council ships that had escaped the devastating defeat. On worlds that had suffered under Council rule for thousands of years, populations looked up at their alien overlords with new eyes, suddenly understanding that the mighty empire was not invincible after all. General Paul Mason stood in the captured command center of War Prime Kethmore's flagship, studying the vast database of Council territories and military positions that had fallen into human hands. The information revealed the locations of every Council fleet, supply depot, and administrative center throughout the galaxy, giving humanity a strategic advantage that no rebellion had ever possessed. Dr. Alex Rivera worked alongside teams of engineers to reverse engineer Council technology, combining alien systems with human innovations to create hybrid weapons and ships that surpassed anything either civilization had developed independently. The captured vessels became the foundation for an entirely new generation of human warships that could match Council forces ship for ship while maintaining the technological advantages that had won the Battle of Sol. On the prison world of Kepler, 7, thousands of enslaved beings watched in amazement as human liberation ships arrived in their system. Ambassador Sarah Clark led the diplomatic mission that offered these oppressed populations a choice their ancestors had never imagined possible. freedom from council rule, and the chance to govern themselves as independent worlds. The first major. Rebellion erupted in the Outer Rim territories, where three species that had been subjugated for over 10,000 years simultaneously declared their independence from council authority. When council enforcement fleets arrived to crush the uprising, they found human ships waiting to defend the rebels, equipped with the same quantum weapons and drone swarms that had destroyed the first assault fleet. Supreme Chancellor Krex Thul of the Hegemony convened an emergency session of the council leadership, his ancient voice trembling with rage as he addressed the assembled alien representatives. For the first time in 50 millennia, the council faced an enemy that not only refused to submit, but actively encouraged other species to revolt against their authority. This human infestation must be contained before it spreads further, the Chancellor declared, his multiple eyes glowing with fury. We must mobilize every fleet in council space to crush this rebellion before our entire empire collapses. But the other council members were no longer unanimous in their support for total war against humanity. The economic costs of the conflict were already devastating their territories, and several member species had begun questioning whether the tribute system was worth maintaining if it required constant warfare to enforce. Meanwhile, human forces under General Mason's command struck at council supply lines throughout the galaxy, using captured intelligence to target the most vulnerable points in their empire. Human ships would appear without warning, destroy military installations, or free slave populations then disappear before council reinforcements could arrive. The hit-and-run tactics that had proven so effective at Sol were now being employed on a galactic scale. Dr. Rivera's analysis of captured council technology revealed the Empire's greatest weakness. They had not innovated or improved their military systems in over 20,000 years. The council had become so dominant that they saw no need for advancement, relying instead on overwhelming numbers and the fear their reputation inspired. Humanity's rapid technological development represented everything they had worked to prevent throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Clark established the Free Worlds Alliance from a mobile command ship that traveled constantly between liberated systems, never staying in one location long enough for council forces to target it. The alliance offered simple terms to any species willing to join: mutual defense, technological sharing, and complete freedom to govern their own worlds without tribute or external interference. The response was overwhelming, with dozens of species requesting membership within the first year of the alliance's formation. Many of these civilizations brought technologies and knowledge that had been suppressed under council rule, creating a renaissance of innovation that accelerated across alliance space. On Earth, President Carter addressed a joint session of the United Nations, announcing humanity's transformation from a single-world species to the leaders of a galactic liberation movement. The same determination that had led to their simple no response to council demands now drove their efforts to free every enslaved world in the galaxy. The council's second major offensive came 2 years after the Battle of Sol, when they assembled a combined fleet of 20,000 ships for a decisive assault on Earth. But this time, they faced not just human forces, but a coalition of dozens of species fighting for their freedom. The Battle of the Outer Colonies lasted for weeks and ended with another devastating council defeat, as Alliance forces used coordinated tactics and advanced technology to outmaneuver and destroy the larger enemy fleet. As council territory continued to shrink, member species began abandoning the alliance one by one, unwilling to sacrifice their own populations for a war they could no longer win. The tribute system that had sustained the empire for millennia collapsed as entire sectors declared independence and joined the Free Worlds Alliance. Supreme Chancellor Krex Thul, now ruling over a fraction of his former empire, sent a desperate message to Earth requesting negotiations for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The transmission arrived at the same moment that Alliance forces liberated the last major council stronghold in the core worlds, effectively ending 5,000 years of alien domination. President Carter's response to the Chancellor's plea for Mercy echoed the same simple directness that had started the entire conflict. The single word "no" had become humanity's signature, representing their absolute refusal to accept subjugation or compromise their principles for convenience. The former Council territories were transformed into the Galactic Federation, a voluntary association of free worlds where no species held dominance over others. Earth became the Federation's first capital, not through conquest, but through the unanimous choice of member worlds who recognized humanity's role in bringing freedom to the galaxy. Engineer Rachel Gold, now Director of Federation Technology Development, established research stations throughout liberated space where different species could collaborate on advancing their understanding of the universe. The knowledge that had been hoarded by the Council for millennia became freely available to any civilization that chose to join the Federation. War Prime Keth Moore, now a prisoner of war, spent his days in comfortable confinement writing his memoirs about the species that had destroyed an empire with a single word. He never fully understood how humanity's simple refusal to submit had cascaded into the collapse of everything the Council had built, but he recognized that their defeat had been inevitable from the moment they encountered a species that valued freedom more than survival. The galaxy entered a new age of cooperation and innovation, built on the foundation of one simple principle that humanity had defended at any cost: the right to say no.